afternoon. We're thrilled that you're here, and I hope we have a good program for you the rest of the afternoon. If you have a question, don't wait. Throw your hand up, scream, holler, jump up and down, and let's answer a question when you have one. I'm going to go through a presentation, talk a little bit about growth promoting implants, how they work, what they do, what they don't do, and then we'll get into carcass premiums and discounts, really about the value of this critter here hanging up, and we're going to have a video session. So last Friday in Meat Science Lab, we killed 10 cattle. 3 of those you're going to see later today. We're going to look at a 2-minute video of each of them, and I'm going to ask you to predict the outcomes of those cattle. And then we'll take another break after those videos, and we're going to roll in 3 sides of beef and 3 other sides that have been completely fabricated into their respective parts. And then we're going to talk about the hows and whys and wherewithals of all of those pieces. Okay? So before I get started with the slides, please, let's start at the bottom here. We're going to, let me move those top 2 stacks, and then let's pass those out, please. Thank you both. And if we have time, Andy, some of these people may not have been to our facility. I'd like to take a few minutes and maybe start at the kill floor, maybe even start back at the pens, take a tour, and you can kind of hear my logic and why I designed this place the way I did. Take a good tour of it. Do we have time for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll make sure we do that then. Are we good on sound? Okay, good. So while they're passing that out, I'm going to jump to the first slide, and we'll get started here. So in growth promoting technology, the original opportunity that came along was called DES. You might remember diethylstilbestrol, and that was originally put into the feed bunk. It was developed in the 1950s, and then it was later figured out how to compress that and put it into a pellet form. And that's no longer available in the market, so you don't see it appear on this slide. But what I want you to remember is that estrogenic growth technology is what came first. Diethylstilbestrol was an estrogenic technology. We still have that today, and that's our oldest growth technology. So you can see the options that exist today with pure estradiol or an estradiol salt. Those are the options. Synovex C or Synovex S, Compudose, and Encore. And if you're taking notes, you can find that estradiol in 2 forms. The original form is estradiol 17 beta. And that's the exact same form that is flowing through your veins and my veins and Andy's veins right now. Every one of us has a whole bunch of estrogen flowing through us, male and female. The other form that you'll see on a label is estradiol benzoate. And the reason we have 2 forms is because we have basically 2 companies that make all of the implants. The first one used this, and then they patent protected it. And then somebody's got to come along with a slightly different alternative that still does about the same thing. So if you're buying a Synovex product, you're going to read the word estradiol benzoate on the label. If you're buying a Merck product, you're going to see the word estradiol 17 beta on it. If you buy anything from Elanco is a generic provider. They're copying something one of the other 2 already did. Okay? So estradiol benzoate, you're always going to see more on the label than this because it's only 80% active. So it takes more estradiol benzoate to equal the same activity of estradiol 17 beta. So if you're looking at two packages, realize you're going to see more on the label of this. So, and then we have another option here. It's called zeranol. Zeranol was discovered completely by accident. It was originally found as a mold growing in corn. The same activity is also known to occur in green field peas, maybe up in like North Dakota or a northern state where you grow some field peas. So it's an estrogenic-like compound, again originally found in corn mold, now produced in a laboratory, very controlled setting, and that's what you find in raw growth. So in yellow, this is what it does to the body. If we put one of those options into the ear of an animal, we're going to get more somatotropin production. If you're taking notes, somatotropin is what you know as growth hormone. That's just a fancy technical word. So you get more growth hormone produced naturally by the body. The second line says decrease somatostatin. Somatostatin is growth hormone inhibitor. So we get more growth hormone and we get less inhibitor of the hormone. Your body is always producing both. And so this is telling the body, hey, produce more growth hormone, produce less growth hormone inhibitor. The third thing that you see is the pituitary gland that's at the base of the brain increases in size and in weight. Very common outcome. So in the kill floor, when we take a tour later, you'll see that right after the head inspection area, we have a bandsaw. We take those skulls, we split them right in half down the middle, crack them open, and at the bottom of the brain, we find the pituitary gland. It's about the size of a marble. In cattle that have been implanted, it is about 50% larger, and it's heavier. You can see the physical difference. You can put it on a scale. You can weigh the physical difference. It's bigger because those animals have been implanted, and their body is saying produce more growth hormone. And that's coming from the pituitary gland. In addition, the body is also saying produce more IGF-1. IGF-1 is another growth hormone. Insulin-like growth factor 1, it's produced by your liver. It's produced by cattle liver. Okay? It's telling the body to grow. To give you a little instance of how this stuff works, anybody ever seen a Guinness Book of World Records? Tallest man, biggest man, heaviest man. Almost every instance of that is a problem with this gland right here. For instance, there's a famous case, second tallest person in the world is an American. And at 8 some feet tall, his mom finally takes him to the doctor and says, I think something's wrong here. He has like size 26 feet. And the doctor says, oh yeah, they do a scan on him. He's got a tumor of his pituitary gland, and it is producing massive amounts of growth hormone. And it's causing his liver to produce even more growth hormone, and so his body is doing what? It's just growing. Muscle, bone, fat, connective tissue, his heart, his liver, everything is just getting bigger because the signal to get bigger is so intense. So what we're talking about in this case is not that intense. We're talking about typically 4 to 10 pellets that we would put into the ear. It's actually much less intense than what the testicles would naturally produce or what the ovaries would naturally produce, but we're trying to improve the efficiency of the animal. If you remember nothing else, star these 2 points. We're telling the body to increase the rate of protein synthesis. What's in muscle? Protein. Make more protein. And keep the rate of protein degradation the same. Why did we eat steak for lunch? Andy?
Get protein.
Get protein. Because we're going to get rid of protein every day. We have a process in our body, so do cattle, so do pigs, so do sheep, so do horses, so does everything, It's called protein turnover. You're getting rid of protein every day. And if you don't take new protein in, what happens to your muscles? They degenerate. Let's call it atrophy, but you're exactly right. They atrophy. And there's some famous cases in humans that occurred during the Holocaust. Those people didn't get to eat. What happened to their body? They withered away to nothing. They atrophied. That's right. And so if we take protein away, what happens to a cow if she's nutrient deficient? You ever seen a BCS #1 cow? Yeah, it's sad. That's exactly what happens. So this is happening every day. So we want protein accretion to outrun degradation every day, particularly in the cattle world. We're in the business of selling pounds. We need synthesis to outrun degradation all the time. Okay, so that's kind of the old technology. And then in the late 1980s came along the next level of technology with the advent of trenbolone acetate. Trenbolone acetate, you would know as TBA. It is the synthetic, lab-produced analog of testosterone. Okay, synthetic, lab-produced. This is not natural, but it's really, really close to natural, and the body really can't tell the difference. But you notice my first line here, 10 times more potent than testosterone. The reason is, if you're taking notes, students, the half-life is much, much, much longer. So it's not destroyed by the body very quickly like normal testosterone is. It has a much longer half-life. In yellow is what it does to the body. It says, hey, we're going to reduce cortisol levels. You would know cortisol as what kind of hormone? Amen. Stress. Cortisol is a stress hormone. TBA reduces the stress hormone, and why that's important is because cortisol, the stress hormone, tells the body, break body components down. Think back to what a BCS #1 cow looks like. She's broken all of her body components down to live and to survive. Cortisol is one of the hormones that breaks body components down. If we reduce that, what do you think happens to protein turnover? We can slow it. We might even can stop it. So we slow protein turnover. We increase the insulin-like growth factor levels of a steer or a heifer to that similar to a bull. Bulls grow, lots of muscle, very fast. If we put TBA in a steer or heifer, we can start to mimic the same and really improve their efficiency. And this is getting into some cool biochemistry stuff, and I don't want to blow you out of your seat here. We increase the satellite cell number. Think of that as the blueprint for muscle growth. We increase the ability for muscle to grow, and we increase the ability for it to grow fast. So with TBA, we're giving the muscle the ability, the blueprint, and the protein to grow really fast. So at the end of the day, we enhance the rate of protein synthesis, very important. And more important, we decrease the rate that it turns over. So if you have more of yesterday's protein and we add all of today's protein, which do you think is more effective, estrogen or TBA? TBA, way more effective. Okay, so that was 1980s technology. Then, in early 2000s, well, let me back up. After the cattle feeding community figured out, hey, this estrogen stuff really works, and this TBA stuff really works, what is the next thing the cattle feeder did? I did it at the same time. They were like, hey, we'll put one in this ear, we'll put one in this ear. That's exactly what they did. They're like, man, this stuff works. So the pharma companies were like, I don't know about that, but let's try it ourselves. And they did. And so the next stage of technology was, okay, let's intentionally put it together in the same ear. And that's where we are today-ish. So now you see lots of options here. Revelor G and IS and IH and S and H and XS, and I need to add XH up there and 200 and Cinevex H and S and Choice and Plus, and I'm probably missing something. That's the modern version. Yeah, there's Cinevex 1 grass, Cinevex 1 feedlot. Probably some other Cinevex 1 I can't think of. So that's the modern technology of today. Put them both together, put it in the ear, same time, and here's the cool part. So we get more metabolizable energy when you put them together. So I want you to remember they work synergistically when they're together. So it's instead of 1 + 1 = 2, it's like 1 + 1 = 5. They're a whole lot better together than they were independently. That's what the cattle feeders figured out, and that's what pharma figured out. So we get more protein accretion. But we also get less lipid accretion because you have a huge impetus by the body to grow muscle. And that's going to slow fat. And that's the reality of it. Which is more efficient, muscle or fat? Muscle. It's more efficient. Which is also more expensive to maintain, muscle or fat? Muscle. Muscle is a whole lot more expensive to maintain than fat is. So that's the modern technology of today. The only difference is the real modern technology is in the XS's and the XH's and the Cinevex 1s, feedlot or grass, and that they're delayed and extended release. Instead of it lasting for 60 or 70 or 80 days, now we're out to 200, maybe some could argue 220 days. They just last a whole lot longer. Okay, one of the things I want to mention is that implants lengthen the growth curve. So in this first chart here, I've got an animal that's growing non-implanted. And let's say we have a time and a weight factor over here. And if I had implanted its twin, its clone, back here, the two stars represent the time and or the weight at which the body composition would be equal. If I take two twin calves and I implant one and I don't implant one, the body composition to be equal is at a different time and weight for the implanted animal. It's growing more efficiently and it's growing faster and it's putting on more protein, but to get to the same body composition, it's got to be heavier because its whole impetus is to grow muscle. And it's a whole lot slower at growing what? Fat. It's a whole lot slower at growing fat. And that's a real outcome of implants. And so what I've experienced over time is if someone is new to implants and they say, you know what, I put my cattle on feed weighing 700 pounds and I sell them at 120 days on feed. And that's how I've been doing it forever. And now I put this new implant in and I sell them at 120 days on feed. Am I disappointed? Oh yeah. Man, my gains were fantastic. My conversions were awesome. And I had like 82% select cattle. What happened? Well, you sold them too green. You need to let them keep going. Instead of 120 days on feed, you might have should have thought about 180 days on feed. And let them, instead of selling a 12 weight, you might need to sell a 15 or 16 weight. Cattle will keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger than you ever think they will. Yes, ma'am. So marbling is a lifetime event. And the muscle is outgrowing the marbling. And so it's going to take longer for the marbling to get to the same point when the ribeye is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because the ribeye is typically outgrowing the marbling faster, particularly with a TBA implant. So you got to give it some time to catch up. Okay. I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you, and I wanted to tell you about the word EBF, or empty body fat. That's a very common term in the cattle nutrition community. So if any of you have a nutritionist, if you feed cattle and you said the 3 letters EBF to your nutritionist, he or she would be very in tune with what I'm talking about. They use that as a metric to get cattle done. EBF is a measure of doneness. So the fatter we make an animal compositionally, the more likely it is to grade choice, premium choice, or prime, or even beyond prime if we're thinking we're making something maybe for the Japanese market. So kind of circle that 28.6 on your handout. That's the gold standard with which the nutrition community says we're feeding this pen of cattle to 28.6% empty body fat to give them the ability to grade choice if they have the genetic opportunity to do so. There are some cattle out there that aren't going to grade choice ever. I've found some. They have an inch back fat, inch and a quarter back fat. The yield grade 7 select. For instance, in all of 2020, in all the cattle we killed in this country, about all 35 million cattle that we killed last year, there were 29 cattle, only 29, that were yield grade 5 standards. So they do exist. Thankfully, they're dead and out of the herd, but they do exist. Okay, so we're trying to feed an animal to 28.6% empty body fat or greater. And kind of work with me here as I build this chart. And I want you to understand where I'm going. Research was done and published in the year 2002 to illustrate that if you're going to implant an animal, and if you're going to more and more aggressively implant an animal, it has to be sold at a greater and greater weight to compensate for all of the protein that you're adding to the body. So in this research, no implanted cattle, so all natural hormone-free cattle that had never received an implant, they achieved 28.6% empty body fat, or let's call it small zero, if you know what I'm talking about in grading. Dr. Hale just taught you about grading, right? They should have achieved that at about 1,145 pounds in this study. If those animals received what I would call a relatively mild implant, Revelor IS, they needed to be 38 pounds heavier as live animals to achieve the same body composition of 28.6% empty body fat. Because they're adding all that protein. They've got to get heavier to get to the same composition. If we give a little more aggressive implant, Revelor S, they've got to weigh 67 pounds more live. So they're heavier, and it took longer to get there. That's why you got to think about those days on feed as you implant an animal more and more aggressively. If they received a Revelor IS followed by a Revelor S, and I want you to write down on your notes, Revelor XS is the same thing here as putting these two together. Revelor XS is the same as putting those two together. They had to weigh 79 pounds more. And you can bet, you know where I'm going here. This would be the most aggressive in this research. Back-to-back Revelor S's, they had to weigh 98 pounds more. So the more aggressively an animal is implanted, the heavier it has to be fed, and the longer it has to be fed to get to an equal body composition. So if I short feed a really aggressively implanted animal, what's going to happen? You're going to be disappointed. Let me give you a case study in this. So, several years ago, I get a phone call from some big cattle feeder in Nebraska. And they say, hey, we need you to run up here and look at some cattle. We got some grading problems. Too many of our cattle are being graded as no roll and as bulls. No roll and bulls. So I flew up to Nebraska, and I said, let's go look at the cattle. So we go look at the cattle in the pens, and everything is, they are thick, heavy muscled, and I was like, when they stood out, you're like, That's some heavy muscling, yield grade 1, like everything looked like a yield grade 1 in like pen after pen after pen. And I said, what's your implant strategy? And so they said, well, we give a mild implant, Synovex Choice, not an overly aggressive implant, but there's a but to this story. We re-implant them every 40 days with Synovex Choice. So the theory was if we use a mild implant, we're okay. The reality was they gave that every 40 days. And so these steers looked like bulls. And they graded like bulls. Because they got a new implant every 40 days. So I'm throwing up my hand. Okay, I mean, I said, we can go to the plant, but I don't think we need to go to the plant. I know what your problem is right now. It's the implant. Who told you to do that? The nutritionist. Who gets paid based on performance? Our performance was fantastic. Average daily gain, feed to gain. Oh, yeah. Amen. So I said, fire the nutritionist. Find it. Here's a list of names. I'll give you some names. Let's start over. This is bad. And we'll try again. Just for humor, I went to the plant to look at the cattle. It was as bad in carcass form as it looked in live form. And then I told the plant, because the plant was kind of screaming too, I said, this is going to take some while for them to work out of this. Because they got a big old stack of cattle with the same problem. And, I mean, after 6, 8 months, they worked their way out of it. So, if your nutritionist says, hey, let's do X, just roll that around one or two times. What happens if? Call me if you need a sound check. I'll help you out. All right, let me back up. I'm shifting gears here. So I want to talk about all of the things that is additive and negative in carcass value. So if you have a hankering to dig into this more, there's the website address of where all of these discounts and premiums are reported. That gets updated every Friday. So once a week, the prices change, or could change. I want to start with a discount that came about. Many of you would remember, quote unquote, the cow that stole Christmas. This audience over here might not know what I'm talking about. This audience over here probably remembers. The cow that stole Christmas, right? I remember it vividly. I was home for Christmas. I met my father-in-laws, and we're delivering hay to cows. There's pretty deep snow. I walk in. My mother-in-law's got CNN on the TV screen, right across the scroll on the bottom. First mad cow in America found in Moses Lake, Washington. I was like, oh my Lord. 2003. December 23rd, 2003. Yep. So, January 12th, 2004, this all began. About 2 weeks later. We got a new acronym, SRM, Specified Risk Materials. And we started mouthing every beef animal in America. We kill 120,000 cattle a day. About 90,000 steers and heifers, the rest is cows and bulls. Somebody looks at the bottom lip of every single one of them and says if they have 3 or more permanent teeth, they're now treated differently. There for a while, they might as well have been radioactive. That's the truth. Nobody wanted them. You couldn't sell it. We were eating all of that meat in America because you couldn't export it. It might as well have been radioactive, and it started to be handled differently. Different saw, different knife, different blade, because we were taking some extreme measures to try and prevent something that is very low risk in and of itself. But that's where it began. And so we don't think about BSE a lot because we don't hear about it and it's not in the news. But let me tell you, it's still something the packer has to deal with every day. So this is an animal with all baby teeth. And that's what 2 permanent teeth looks like. And I know you're a ranching crowd, so this is probably boredom to you. But right here is where it all begins. When that 3rd tooth breaks the gum line, that animal still gets marked as a 30 plus. it still gets treated differently. Different saw, different blade, gets fabricated at a different time, gets marketed in a different manner as a 30 plus. It is branded differently, solely because that animal had 3 or more permanent teeth. That still happens today, just like it did January 12th of 04. Nothing has changed. And it's a pain in the butt for the packer. So right now, they're taking $20 a hundredweight off. Let's do the quick math. Average steer in America weighs just over 900 pounds. 9 times 20 is 180 bucks off the top. 180 bucks off the top every time you bring one to town. And that's real. And so that's their incentive, financial incentive to you to not bring a mature animal to harvest. Now, a place like Cavanis or Preferred Beef up in Booker, they expect it. That's their business. But Tyson, Cargill, JBS, National Beef, they're the ones sending the financial message. We don't want those. We don't want to deal with it. Don't bring them to us. If you do, we're going to take it off the top. And that's exactly how it's handled. Next thing that happens, and these are kind of in chronological order. The mouthing happens early in the process. They're just typically on two shackles when that occurs. Later in the process, we get a weight. Okay? If the animal's less than 600 pounds, as of last night, we were taking off $19.81 per 100 pounds on average. 600 to 900 pounds is no discount. 900 to 1,000, we're only taking off $1.07 on average. Greater than 1,000, we're taking off $10.54 on average. Tell me, students, why more discount on the lights and less on the heavies? Yeah, you're very close. But we're not worried about the meat so much, we're worried about labor. Okay, so let me go through a scenario. All right? So we're going to put Andy on the gut table. Andy on the gut table. We'll give you some training first. We'll give you 3 days to figure it out, and then we're going to move you to another job. But 3 days. And so you get 25 seconds per animal to gut it. And anybody ever gutted a deer? Can you do it in 25 seconds? No. Let me tell you, the people in our slaughterhouses can do it. 25 seconds. It's rolling. And I mean rolling hot. 25 seconds. It's out. It's out. It's out. It's out. Now, they do it in a very moving, extremely efficient fashion, but they're at 25 seconds and it's gone. So, I can put a 1,000-pound animal in front of you, and by the way, you're making $25 an hour. That's real. You're making $25 an hour now at your average slaughterhouse. So I can put one animal in front of you, you're making 25 bucks an hour, and it weighs 1,000 pounds. Or you're still making 25 bucks an hour, and I can put a 600-pound animal in front of you. What does the math say? Make them what? Math says make them heavier. Make them heavier all the time. How many of you remember when a heavyweight discount was 900 pounds? Lynn does. When I was in school, a heavyweight discount was 900 pounds. Then it went to 950. And then it went to 1,000. And then it went to 1050. And now I know packers that are 11. And I know one slaughterhouse in Nebraska that says, we don't care. Blood on the floor. Bring it. 16, 17, 18, 19, a ton. Bring it. Because the math says cattle must get bigger. And if you've ever done any accounting, that math is very clear. Make them bigger. Yes, sir?
Okay. A few years back, Iowa is up there, came down, bought a lot of cattle and took up their fed them. They fed those animals so they were 2,500 pounds or so. And it cost us down here, cost all the discounts on it, right or wrong.
Well, you didn't. It didn't cost you anything. It cost whoever owned them.
Okay.
More.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah. Now there is probably a biological limit to how big they can get. I'm going to say it's 2,500-ish pounds, and it's more of a technical issue on the slaughter floor than anything. So for a period of time on the slaughter floor, an animal's hanging by one trolley through their Achilles heel. So it's back here. And I only know because I've experienced this myself. The bone that holds that tendon together can only take so much stress. And we've had it happen here, killing really big cattle, 23, 4, 5, 600 pounds, that the bone breaks when you put all of that weight on one Achilles heel. And that's just how you do it during the dress procedure. You dress out one leg while the other is holding the weight, and then you clip it off, put the Achilles heel on the shackle, put it on the rail, take the weight off, and you're dressing out the other leg. And in that 50, 75, 100 feet of moving time, it's very risky. That's probably the most dangerous place in a plant, because you have all the weight supported by the Achilles heel. And there's a biological limit to what that can hold. And so that's probably where the maximum weight is in our industry, the practical maximum weight. But that discount is still applied. My point in saying this is the math says make them bigger, and as most of you who've been in the industry long enough, you've recognized that the heavyweight discount just keeps getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And there are tax accountants and there are bean counters in the back are saying, make them heavier. What's the flip side of that? If I make them heavier, what happened to the pieces? They get bigger. They get bigger.
So tell what happens to our cow herd if we're trying to moderate our cow herd to be more moderate sized cows instead of great big 1,500, 1,600 pound cows that will produce these big carcasses. What does it do to our cow-calf producers if they're moderating their cow herd to fit their country based on what they have to graze versus what the industry, the accountants are wanting? So how's that all jive?
So my opinion, and I grew up on a ranch, is for everybody to take care of their operation, do the absolute best you can given your resources. Do not worry about the cattle feeder or the packer, because they're going to buy your widget, and your widget weighs 600 pounds, 700 pounds, 800 pounds. They're going to figure out what your genetic base is, and they're going to modify growth with the technologies available. I can take a 4-weight calf, and I can make it weigh 1,800. It may take a while to get there, but I know how to do it. And nutritionists, veterinarians, they know how to do it as well. So the ranching community has got to do the best they can with cow size on their operation with their resources. Everybody else, they will figure it out. Take care of yourself. Okay? So, what do you think about that package? I bought that. It was actually for sale at a Walmart. It was made by my friends at Tyson Foods. And it was the absolute epitome of no consistency. So some of my buddies say this is the his and her steak. So since I'm a meathead, his and hers. His and hers and theirs. We have easily premium choice. Might have been certified Angus beef, but that ribeye is about 5 square inches. I've seen pork chops way bigger than that, with 1/3 of an inch of back fat. And then we got no roll over here with no back fat, no marbling, 15-inch eye. Right? His and hers. So I thought this was kind of funny. I bought the package, took several photos, wrote a pretty catty note, shipped it to my friends at Tyson. They didn't think it was near as funny as I did.
They were working on the average.
They were working on the average. Yeah, on average, that's a great package. That's right. That's exactly right. Problem is, we don't eat the average. Okay, what's going to happen to carcass weight over time? They're going to get bigger. They're going to get bigger. Whether the ranching community makes the cow base bigger, or we feed them heavier, or we put more growth technology in them, they're going to get bigger. Because the math says what? Make them bigger. The math says make them bigger all the time. Let me ask you a contrasting question. Who in here gets paid for a lighter weight, slower growing calf? You get paid for those. A premium?
Quality.
For a lighter weight, slower growing calf.
As long as the quality's better, yes.
As long as the quality's better. I have never seen that. I know what you're talking about. Are you selling a purebred or a half-blood?
3/4 and above.
3/4 and above. Okay. And as long as you're getting offset with a premium, you can make that work. Yeah.
We care about quality, period.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so the carcass is only going to get bigger. Every signal says that. So pieces are getting bigger. So what do we do about it? Well, most people in the industry are going to ultimately cut items differently. And the reason being, do you need a ribeye steak that's 15, 16, 17 square inches in size? Probably not. Because if you wanted it to meet an ounce weight, your 1¼ inch became a 1, became a 3/4, became a 5/8, and is now a 1/2 inch thick. Who's had a thin steak? But you got the whole face at a restaurant. And that's becoming more and more common. So to combat that, what we're ultimately going to see is the industry do some sort of innovative cutting. And for a ribeye, this is one of the methods you could do, where you take the spinalis muscle off, tie it into a roast, cut that roast into steaks, and then take the longissimus and just sell a smaller portion. That's becoming more and more popular. The downfall is there's more cutting labor to do that. And there's typically yield loss because you're cutting fat away as you take those two muscle groups apart. You can do the same thing with a strip. I've had one of these at a restaurant. You want it 1 inch thick, but you only want 8 or 10 ounces, well, you're getting half of it now, instead of the entire 20-ounce strip that it would have been at 1 inch thick. That's already coming. And we'll likely see more of this in the next 2, 3, 4 decades as cattle get bigger and bigger. Okay, moving past weight discounts, the next one is for quality. So as of last night, the discount was $24.92. This morning, it's already bumped to $33. So the choice select spread's now $33. It's changed from last night. The market signal is saying we really don't need any more select cattle. We need choice cattle to fill orders. So go figure out how to get us more choice cattle, and we're sending an economic signal to send us less select cattle. That's why the discount is what it is. Fundamentals of supply and demand. The next step beyond select going down is a USDA standard. Dr. Hale had some pictures of this. Notice that neither of these is an official USDA marbling card. That actually was an official USDA marbling card. We have 9 levels of marbling, and we only have 6 official cards. Everything else is pictures that people like Dan and I have taken. So these are my opinions, Dr. Hale. That's my opinion of a traces, and that's my opinion of a practically devoid. Yeah, no, and nobody can argue because there's no standard. So I got to be close, right? So the discount is $35.36 per 100 pounds. Again, an economic signal, don't bring us one of those. The next discounts are for poor boxed yield. A yield grade 4 has a lot of trimmable waste fat. A yield grade 5 has even more trimmable waste fat. You saw some great pictures that Dr. Hale showed you. We're going to take that animal and we're cutting off everything but about 1/8 of an inch now. Cattle are leaving the plant leaner and leaner and leaner and leaner all the time. We take that trim fat off, we sell it right back to cattle feeders, or we sell it to biodiesel producers for about 60 cents a pound. Instead of selling this $12 ribeye, we're trimming it off. You take a discount for it, life goes on. Okay? The other discount, I know Dan talked about this briefly, was a dairy animal. You remember he talked about angularity. The ribeye on the left is clearly from a dairy animal. It gives you some angular images. So think the hindquarter of a dairy, the hindquarter of a Holstein. That kind of looks like the ribeye. Very angular in nature. That's exactly what you get there. Dan also mentioned lots of bone. So I've got some data for you. The average dairy animal has 3.1 pounds of muscle for every pound of bone. That's what those numbers mean. 3.1 pounds of muscle for every pound of bone. The average beef animal is 4.1 to 1. So you're clearly getting more muscle for every pound of bone in a beef animal, which is why we're taking a discount for those dairy critters. We're also taking a discount for hard bones. So a hard bone is an animal that has ossified at the C, D, or E maturity level. It's in our older quality grades. So now we're, instead of selling Prime Choice Select Standard, we're now selling Commercial Utility Cutter Cannon. So this animal is the older, also commonly known as the cow grades. All right? And notice what I have in yellow. Heifers and late cut bulls are at risk. The reason being, this reaction that happens in the bone is solely caused by one hormone, estrogen. Heifers cycle every how many days? Every 21 days. They get a peak of estrogen every 21 days. And if you get enough of those peaks, it will cause their bone growth plates to cease growing, and it will cause the buttons on their backbone to completely ossify, or to ossify to a greater rate. If a heifer gets pregnant, her placenta produces copious amounts of estrogen. And you really get a hard bone from a pregnant heifer. You also get hard bones from bulls because the testes produce testosterone, and the body converts testosterone into estrogen. So a heifer, a pregnant heifer, and a late cut bull are at risk of this. Yes, sir?
What do you consider late cut bull?
So if you cut it after puberty,
Anytime after 6 months to a year.
yeah. So, for instance, I'll give you a case study. How about that? So, 2005, I was doing a short course for what was known as Conti beef, now known as Five Rivers Cattle Feeding. And I go to Hartley Feedlot, and I picked out 6 cattle to do a course much like today for their cattle managers. Took videos of them, slaughtered them in the meat lab, had the same setup that we're going to have here in a little bit, and there's an animal in there that I picked it out as a steer. I actually picked it out as a heavyweight steer. It was a big 1,600 pound steer. I knew it'd make a big carcass, and that's why I chose it. However, when we split it, it was a hard bone. So then I called the cattle manager back, and I said, hey, tell me about ear tag, And he's, I can hear him typing away on the board there, and he says, well, what do you want to know? And I said, well, that steer is a hard bone, and steers just don't do that. Something's up with the steer. And I said, did you buy any late cut bulls? And he says, yes. And I said, what's the end weight of those cattle? And it was something over 1,000. And I said, how late cut were they? And he said, we cut them here at the yard. So 1,000 pound bull made it to Hartley, cut at the yard, ossified. Yep, yes sir. All right, and the infamous dark cutter. If you've never seen one of those, that's a great image on the left. It is deep, dark, rich purple, just like Dr. Hale's shirt. Burgundy. Maroon. Maroon. Maroon platoon. So that's a dark cutter. And it would probably be the most juicy eating experience you've ever had. Would be a little tough and would be kind of bland in flavor. But it's discounted predominantly for color, secondarily for lack of shelf life. This stuff is so high in pH, bacteria love to grow on it, and you only have about a week of shelf life. So most of these dark cutting cattle are sold typically to a mom and pop restaurant under what the packer will call a red label program. The restaurant knows what they're buying. They get ribs, they get strips, they get tenders, they get sirloins. The rest of the carcass is ground into just ground beef outcomes, and it gets blended with normal cattle, so you don't really see it in ground beef. But these steaks would get cooked, typically at a mom and pop restaurant. You would never see it per se in this form. You get a cooked steak, but it would be very juicy to sensory palatability aspects. Okay, happens at 0.5 to 1% of the cattle population year round. We're fixing to get into high outcome days. So every fall, as we switch from hot days to cold nights, the dark cutting rate will usually spike and hit 5, 6, 7% of the entire beef kill on any given day. And the reason is the cattle are extremely stressed during this period. So it's 90 or 100 degrees in the day, and the nights start falling down in the 50s, and then the 40s, and then the 30s. And they're trying to build a hair coat, but they can't build it fast enough. And then they get back up to the 90s the next day, and their body's saying, well, why do we want to build a hair coat? Then it falls in the 40s at night, and they're shivering. And it's really stressful for fat cattle to go through that up and down day after day. So in October, this is going to spike. And there'll be a whole lot of this stuff available in the market. And then we'll get into cold weather in November, December. It'll fundamentally go away, down to 0.5%. So this is a stress issue. The animals were under extreme stress in the days prior to slaughter. The most severe outcomes of this that I have ever seen are typically weather or trucking problems. So for instance, you have a really bad hailstorm come through the yard 1, 2, 3 days prior, and animals are overstressed, maybe severely bruised from hail damage. The stress of that will knock them off feed. We'll get a lot of dark cutters. The other instances that I've seen are trucking issues. Let's say we had an issue years ago. We're doing research with the Clayton Livestock Research Center up in Clayton, and those cattle were coming to Tyson. Hot August day, and the truck blows out his trailer tires between Delhart and Texline. So they're out there on the middle of the road, sitting in August heat, little to no wind that day, in the world's largest cheese grater. Right? You know what I mean? The semi looks like the world's largest cheese grater. But anyway, they're sitting in there baking, and cattle pant to release heat, and they're in, it's probably 100+ degrees inside that box for hours and hours and hours while they got a repairman out there to fix the truck. Finally, those cattle get to Tyson. There were 4 or 5 other loads, no issues with those cattle. That one load was almost half dark cutters because they're just panting, trying to stay cool inside that box. So there's some stressful event that causes the dark cutting phenomenon. And huge discount. It's not because they don't want it. They know that no producer's trying to cause it. It's that it's hard to sell it. There's a very limited audience that will buy this product. Blood splash is another limited event, tough to sell. So imagine that steak is in the retail case. That's hard to sell. What's wrong with it? It's different. It looks unique. I don't want to buy it. If you had one of those, it'd be the last thing sitting there, and nobody would ever pay for it. So you got a discount, and this is caused by a ruptured capillary. We call that petechial hemorrhaging. So the blood pressure exceeded what the animal could withstand, and its capillaries ruptured during the process. Quite rare, but it does occur. And if you're selling cattle on a grid, the producer often pays for it. And this last image here, that's a callus. Also a significant discount. That's an injured muscle. So it's kind of hard to tell. That's actually a ribeye. You gotta really look at it to see what I'm talking about. But that's the ribeye face right there. So this animal had a significant injury here, and the muscle cells were replaced with fat. And you see these all over the body. So when an animal sustains an injury that causes death to the muscle, it is typically replaced with fat in a process we call steatosis. Okay, any questions about discounts before I move to premiums? Okay, we'll move to premiums then. All right, the first premium we want to talk about, kind of back to one of your questions, is all natural beef. And I want to open this up and alleviate some misconceptions about all natural beef. And I'll do that with these three labels at the top. These three labels all meet the legal definition for all natural beef, but they mean three completely different things. Okay? Everybody follow me here so I don't lose you. On the far left, it says nature source. Write down national beef. Liberal, Dodge City, Tama, Iowa. 3 plants where you can take an animal for this label. A nature source animal is probably what most consumers think is all natural. That animal never received a growth promoting implant, a hormone, if you will, a growth promoting hormone, exogenously ever in its lifetime. It never received an antibiotic, no Draxxin, no Micotil, no Tylan, no Ariamycin, nothing ever in its lifetime. That's what we call a never ever animal. Never ever. Okay? They're the ones that are receiving this $31 premium.
What were the 3 plants you said?
So national beef,
Okay.
Liberal, Dodge City, and Tama, Iowa. Those are their 3 kill plants. Yeah. So that's a never ever label. All right? That animal is growing slower, less efficiently. So you didn't give it a growth promoting implant. And so this money that they're giving you to do it is to offset the lost production efficiency. The second thing it's giving you to offset is the case in which you have to treat one. You should probably expect 10% of the cattle are going to need some help for BRD at some point. And so you either let them die, or hope they make it, or you treat them and get them out of the pen. I hope you choose the latter. Treat them, get them healthy, get them out of the pen. As soon as you treat them, the next thing you should do is put what in their ear? Implant. The moment you treat them, you probably should give them an implant while you got them in the chute already. Be done with it. That's a mistake that a lot of producers make. They treated it and they pulled it out, and then they never gave it an implant, and it didn't qualify for anything now. And it's just growing slow. As soon as you pull it out, give it an implant and start to increase some efficiency. Okay, the second label, Nature Well. Also a national beef label. Also a national beef label. But it's different. The rules say the animal did not receive an antibiotic or a growth promoting hormone in the last 120 days of life. Okay, so what's the average length for feeding cattle today?
150 at least, 180.
About a 185 is where we're at today. So I can't give it in the last 120 days. If they get sick, are they typically getting sick in the end, or is it up front? Up front. First 3 weeks is when you're going to doctor them in most cases. So if I'm giving them a Draxxin, Macatil, Nuflor, Baytril, whatever that is, that's typically up front. The first month for sure is when that BRD break happens. Okay, I'm good as long as I feed them 120 days past that. Do we have any implants on the market that last more than 120 days? Any? Oh yeah. We at least got 3. Actually, I know 4. 4 implants on the market that last longer than 120 days. So the animal might have received an antibiotic, and then all I got to do is cut Thailand off in the end. And they for sure received a growth-promoting hormone, and I get to sell it under the Nature Well label. It's a little bit of a discount to the Nature Source label, but it's still a premium. Okay, the last label, my friends at Harris Ranch, they follow the legal definition. So circle this over here and draw you an arrow to Harris Ranch. The legal definition of all natural is a product containing no added ingredients. Think salt, pepper, spices, sodium, nitrate, phosphates, things that you would see on like a sausage label or a processed meat label. Those are added ingredients and are minimally processed. So I didn't make it into a hot dog. I didn't make it into a ham. I didn't make it into deli meat. Can I have a hormone and can I give the animal some Thailand, Rumensin, MGA, and sell it under the Harris Ranch label? You can give it anything you want. Nothing matters in the live animal phase. Nothing matters. You can do whatever you want to it. And you can legally put that label on it. That label goes on everything. So all natural is what you want it to be. The details are in your marketing program. Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question?
Oh, I was just wondering, is this the Harris Ranch in California?
It is.
Okay.
It is. They got 1 feedlot, 1 slaughterhouse.
Yeah, they're up there between San Francisco
Yeah.
and LA.
They're in Selma. That's right. Yes, sir.
Does it have to be Black Angus?
Nope. Now, this label happens to be, but that's that unique Black Angus label. They have other labels that would not say Black Angus on it.
So Ty, would it be important if some of these cow-calf producers are going to retain ownership, that they know where their feedlot's going to sell these cattle, to know whether they can qualify for some of these things?
That would be paramount, not important. To develop a relationship that says, hey, maybe before the calf hits the ground, like, hey, I'm going to sell this animal to you. What's the rules of the game? Show me the sheet. Let me see what can be done, what can't be done, and I'll go all the way back here. Because in those never ever animals, that's real important. You can't do anything as a calf. So you got to be real careful, and you're signing an affidavit in most cases that said you did nothing. Very important. Okay, the next category is NHTC cattle. So the only caveat here is the animal never received the growth promoting implant in the ear. This has nothing to do with antibiotics, just about growth promoting technologies. And so the group that really made this kind of popular is up in Oregon, Country Natural Beef. They were the clear leaders in this market setting, and they kind of developed the market for others to now follow. The second big market here was our European Union customers. So there have been feedlots that have sourced those cattle specifically to go to a specific slaughterhouse to be pushed over to the European Union, and that's worked well. And so it's a niche market. So before you say, you know what, I'm not going to implant my calves, you better find the buyer that says, I'll give you a premium for not doing that. Don't just do it and hope you're going to get the market. Get that relationship built and get a contract signed before you decide not to do it. Okay, the next premium here is our prime product. High prime, average prime, low prime. They all get sold for the same price. There's no differentiation of that 3 different levels of quality. They're about $20 per hundredweight right now. So that 900-pound carcass, how much do we get? 180. So this offsets all those 30 pluses. If you have a 30 plus and a prime, now you're wash. Yeah. After prime, we have premium choice. And in the top, you see certified Angus beef. That was our first premium choice program. It's designated by the specification G1. It was the very first. Started in 1978. Barely made it by 1 vote. Henry Gardner voted yes, let's do that. Otherwise, if Henry Gardner hadn't voted yes, nothing would have happened. So it was by a 1-vote margin that they decided to go with that. And I think everybody in the room would say, you know what? That's probably the single most successful beef marketing campaign in the history of ever. Thankfully, they did. It's worked well, and it's improved everything, not just Angus value. A few years later, in 1986, Cargill said, hey, we're having pretty good success selling all of this certified Angus beef product, but we've got some cattle that would meet the same criteria. They're just red or white or tan or spotted or striped or something other than black. Let's sell that product for a premium to restaurants and retailers and purveyors. We'll just change the name. So G2 is sterling silver. Many of you would recognize this. This popular brand, you see it at restaurants. It doesn't have the same name recognition that CAB does, but it is a well-recognized brand. And then Tyson said the same thing. And then JBS said the same thing. And National said the same thing. Today, there are 94 of those. 94. The market might be saturated, Dr. Hale, with branded programs. That's right. That's exactly right.
So, Kyle, one thing that's important to say, and I'm saying this as an ex-Angus breeder,
Yes.
but as a proponent of Angus,
Sure.
the Angus breed outdoes all the other branded beef deals all put together by a bunch. There's more certified Angus beef sold than all the others put together.
Totally. Totally.
And that's because there's so many Angus bulls nationally being used to get CAB.
Right.
So that's just important.
So about 68% of our cow herd is black and would qualify for the hide color phenotype that starts the whole ball rolling.
Exactly. CAB is kind of what got all these other things started.
Amen. Totally. Totally. And it's been a boon to the beef industry.
Exactly.
That's one of the big reasons beef demand continues to be strong. It's right there. That's right. Okay. Moving on in our premiums, we're going to give a small premium for yield grade 1. So you remember I had the 4 and the 5. And the yield grade 1 carcass, you get $3.58 a hundredweight, not a big premium. But the packer is going to debone that and put it in a package. There's no fat trim off of yield grade 1. Take the bones off, put it in a vacuum package, seal it, put it in a box, you're gone. A yield grade 2, they're going to trim it like a yield grade 1. The yield grade 4 and the yield grade 5, they get trimmed to look like the yield grade 1. That's what the product looks like when it goes out the door. So all the excess is whittled off, sold back to cattle feeders and biodiesel producers. The yield grade 2 animal has a very minor discount at only $1.58. But it is still, or not minor discount, minor premium at $1.58. But it still is a premium. So, in total, this is what we're looking for. The red is a discount. The white is par. And the green is a premium. There's clearly more red up there. And in today's marketing, Andy, the goal is to avoid the discounts and let the premiums happen. Because there's more discounts, and the discounts are always more severe than the premiums are good. So you're trying to avoid the discounts. And that's why sorting in cattle feeding has become so paramount. There are very few, or at least there are fewer, all-in, all-out pens at a feedlot. There's a lot of sorting. Sort out the lights, sort out the heavies, sort out the olds, and figure out how to narrow that down to reduce the discounts. That's becoming commonplace at a feedlot today. Sort to reduce the discounts.
So is yield grade 3 still the most common yield grade?
Absolutely.
The vast majority of the fat cattle?
In 2020, 50% of the cattle, 50 on the money, were yield grade 3s. So let me tell you about that a little bit to Andy's point. Cattle have gotten fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter because our consumer wants what? Marbling. They want taste fat. So if I went back 10 years ago, our industry was producing 3% prime. Last year we produced 10% prime. So we've tripled the highest quality grade. What has that done to yield grades 4 and 5? Boosted them. Boosted them a lot. What has that done to yield grades 1 and 2? Decreased them. And in 2020, for the first time ever, we're in a very, very weird and unique place. 4% of all of last year's cattle, 4% were yield grade 1. 10% were prime. Never in history has anything like that happened, where you have 2.5 times the chance of making a prime as you do a yield grade 1. We're feeding the cattle bigger, heavier, longer, fatter, more Angus genetics. And we're getting what we want, but we're getting a whole lot of that trim fat. A whole lot of trim fat. So when I say that, I'm not sure it's the most efficient thing to do, but we're doing it for our customer. Yep. Okay, let me pass out a handout here. I'm going to pass out a handout. Please, please. And then we're going to watch some videos and we're going to take a bio break. Somebody's, thank you.
So in 2020, I mean, the coronavirus, that had some impact on that, right? Because slaughter capacity and
You're
so
exactly
the
right.
cattle stayed on feed longer than what they normally would.
Yeah, for a good month minimum. Cattle got fatter, quality went up. Yep. And we're probably going to see a repeat of that this fall.
Yeah. Where's it going now?
It's coming.
So it's not going to be just one of your
Sir?
It's not going to be just one of your
No, it's coming again. So we'll see what there's going to be ramifications all across the country because of Tyson's policy. All right, let me back up. Think you're it? All right, take a look at your handout, please. We're going to watch 3 videos in order from left to right. The first video is going to be a black heifer, then a black steer, and then a longhorn steer. And I'm going to ask you to estimate the dressed yield. So dressed yield, that's the percentage of the carcass hanging on the rail that represented the live animal. It's a fraction. Somewhere in the 50, 60, 70% range would be an appropriate answer. Okay, 50, 60, 70% of the carcass is what the live animal weighed. You with me? Do I need to say that again? Also estimate the animal's quality grade. Prime Choice Select Standard Commercial Utility Cutter Canner, and its yield grade to 1 decimal. Yield grade 3.2, 2.8, 4.6. give us a 1 decimal yield grade. Okay, you get a 2-minute video. If we need to watch it twice, we'll watch it twice. No pressure. No pressure. Andy, we should have brought some prizes for this.
So if you want to participate, put your name at the top.
Yeah, gotta put your name on it.
And we'll bring it.
Okay.
Remember, so the options are your dressing percent, then prime, choice, select, or standard. You'll bring 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? 5.
So Andy, I think what I'll do, once we're done here, is you exit the room, give us your paper if you want to be entered in the chance to win a free admission to the next Hemphill County, whatever you call the day, Beef Cattle Conference, right? I've spoken at that before. And everybody clear out of the room for a few minutes. I'm going to bring everything in. We're going to go over the carcasses. We'll go over the yields. And then after we're done with that, I'll put everything up and we can take a tour of the facility.